back to Brashonomics, everybody. Really excited to have Dave Duncan with us, broker and co-owner of Keller Williams Realty Bothell, who has had an incredible sales record over the course of his career, averaging 50 transactions per year since 1986 and over 85 since 2000. Welcome, Dave. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Heather?
I'm good. I'm excited that you're here because we're going to talk about something kind of fun today. We're going to talk about buying a new home. And when you were here last time, you told us that new construction is starting to come back.
It's absolutely back. Builders are gobbling up every piece of dirt they can, and we're selling them as fast as we can build them.
Mm-hmm. And buying a home's fun, but buying a new home, kind of like buying a new car. Everything's pretty, shiny. It's not going to break, hopefully, as quickly. I don't know. I have to assume that that might be an exciting thing for someone to get a fancy, fresh new house.
Yeah, there's such a high demand for new homes, and just for all the reasons you just mentioned. Again, we're as quick as we're building them, we're selling them. So we actually try to, I mentioned this last show, is we're trying to manage the sales, meaning if you have so many in a given month, you raise prices to slow it down. Obviously, if you don't get enough sales that you're looking for in that given month, you'll add some incentives or bonuses.
Yeah, so you're not oversaturating the market. You're just letting them all in kind of at a more managed pace, it sounds like.
Perfect world, that's the plan.
Yes, so we're going to talk about the two kinds of new homes you can get today, and we're talking about spec builds versus custom builds, or spec builder versus a custom builder. And I kind of wanted you to explain what that means and what the differences are for buyers out there.
That's a big difference. If a spec builder is a guy that builds a volume of houses, it could be 20 a year, could be 400 or 500 a year for some of the big national guys. But basically, they buy the land, they have a plan. I'm going to start 6, 8, 10 houses a month. And they got a tight schedule, and they go at a certain pace. And come hell or high water, they're going to build that house in that timeline. So you have limited, and we'll get into all the differences, but you'll have limited choices because they're going at a quicker pace. Versus a custom builder, and typically you're not going to get involved with a custom sale, and in Snohomish County, maybe over 400,000 or 500,000. East side in the city, maybe 600,000-700,000. That's where it's going to be built slower. You're going to have more choices. The guy's going to accommodate you a little more versus a spec or volume builder.
So just, to help me wrap my mind around it, you're kind of talking about a spec builder might be those big neighborhoods you see with the signs out front where there's 3 or 4 floor plans. That's how the whole neighborhood is. You really don't get to have much say in the process of its building and what finishes you want, whereas a custom house is, as a buyer, you can be more involved in what you want to happen?
Generally, that's true.
Okay.
Generally, that's true. For example, I work with a builder that's definitely a spec builder, and you do get choices, but there's real tight timelines. In our contract, we have what's called phasing. Phase 1 is before we start. You can pick the cabinets. You can pick skylights. You can pick some
maybe
things
a couple different finishes
early on. Well, that might be phase 2 or 3 later on. Versus phase 5, when the house is all done, your choices are limited to landscaping, blinds, fencing, that kind of stuff.
And with a custom build, the choices are just you get a greater range.
Yeah. Again, to cite some of the differences on a custom house, it's going to take longer because the builder's willing to stop construction.
Yeah,
and then let you pick what you want. For example, you may have the perfect plan design, but as it's being built, you're thinking, I'd like to see this room a little larger. So you could just stop, move some of the walls a little bit. Now, that's a big request.
Yeah.
Spec builder, absolutely not an option. Yeah. Custom builder might do it, but there's a cost of ripping out the wall. There's 3 costs. It's not just, how much more to do that. It's how much to rip it out, how much to reinstall it, and what's the time cost, because the time is interest cost with the bank, because the bank charges you every day. So there's that cost too.
Yeah. So what are some of the other differences between spec and custom homes? Because I have to imagine that we mentioned upgrades and some other choices, but I imagine that pricing and maybe the timeline are going to be different.
Timeline's a big difference. Again, the spec builders are going to be on a time. They're going to be building them in typically anywhere from 75, 80 days for the little small dingbat houses. Smaller houses.
I like that. The dingbat houses.
Forgive me, that's a trade phrase. The smaller houses with not a lot of bells and whistles. To little bigger ones with some more special features, which might be more like up to 120 days. So typically that's a spec builder timeline.
Yeah.
I've seen customs take a year because they go slow. They're bigger. They take more management, so they're going to more details to oversee, and it takes time, or they go at a slower pace. And again, the consumer pays for that, because every day costs $1. And
which brings us to pricing, which you had mentioned when we were kind of talking about the differences between the two. And it sounds like a custom home. I mean, a custom anything is going to be more expensive, right?
Exactly. Which leads us to the upgrades. We talked about upgrades, what choices you have and don't have. Again, with the spec builder, you've got limited choices. It's within a finite timeline. If you're past that timeline, again, it's not an option, not going to happen. With a custom builder, you can do that, but the catch is, dollars. Let's talk about dollars for a minute. A lot of times buyers might have second thoughts after buying a house. You spent X for an upgrade. You put up $20,000 for upgrades, and then they decide for whatever reason they can't buy it. Even if it's a legitimate reason, lost job, moving out of town, they think, well, I should get that money back. But the problem is that money's been spent. You give that to the builder. The builder then hires Joe contractor. He does the work, and the money's come and gone. So that's money they don't get back. So it's really important. It's really important they think, very thoroughly beforehand before they do that upgrade, because that money's gone the minute they spend it.
Does that tie into the earnest money that you were going to mention?
Well, and earnest money too, same thing. Earnest money, you've got X amount of time, anywhere from 15 to 30 days, depending on the builder, to get that back subject to financing. But most builder addendums, and recognized builder addendums, are written by the builder for the builder.
For a reason.
Yeah,
it costs a lot to build a house.
The multiple listing forms are meant to be, generic, or not to favor either one too much. Again, builder addendums are written for the builder. So after a certain amount of time, that money's non-refundable too, under 99% of the circumstances. So I always tell everybody, if you have an ounce of doubt, any concerns whatsoever, X is the day that money becomes hard and gone. So you need to, talk to your buyer agent and be candid with them, so they can be candid with the listing agent. So if indeed they have doubts, we can protect them and get their money back, because after a certain point in time, that money's gone.
So you need to be serious. So, with any home, there's usually things that you can negotiate on, when you're going into contract. Is that the same with new homes? Are there things you can negotiate on? Talk a little bit about that.
Like your last show with Lisa and Wes, they talked about how it is definitely a seller's market, and there's not a lot of negotiation, and a lot of times things sell above list price. One thing for sure you cannot negotiate on is price.
Okay.
For example, and the reason is, it's not just that house. A lot of buyers think, what's $5,000 on this one house going to do to the builder? But if, let's say it's a 50-lot plot, actually I'm pricing out a 65-lot plot right now. So let's say in the first house he gives $5,000 off. In the builder's mind, it's not $5,000.
That's five times however many houses he's building. 5 times 65, so that's a $330,000 decision instead of a $5,000 decision. So price is not it, because they have to preserve their appraised values. That's good to know.
But if they're going to give you anything, closing costs.
Okay.
And there's two forms of closing costs. They can just give you closing costs themselves. Up to typically 3% is a number that a buyer may need for a different transaction. Or a lot of times they have the preferred lenders who kick in some of it too. So between the lender and the builder, you can get some closing costs paid for. Probably the best and easiest concession you can get is upgrades, because that's something. It's not. It may be, because then they can give you something that might have $5,000 in value, but their hard cost
is different.
Might be $3,000. I mean, just to throw crude numbers out. So asking for upgrades. I mean, typically buyers ask for closing costs first, because that's a valid need. Upgrades would be the second thing, and the most likely concession the builder's going to give you. So you could ask for upgrades.
Right. Well, we have to go break in just a second, but here with Dave Duncan, managing broker with Keller Williams Bothell, is there anything else people can negotiate on before we go to break?
Well, just remember that it's all about the net with the builder. So whether it's price, whether it's closing costs, whether it's upgrades, whether you need a longer closing date because you're stuck in a lease, whatever it is, it's all about the net dollars. They're going to look at what's my bottom line after factoring those things, because those all translate into a hard number, and they'll add up the hard number, and they'll give you X, whatever that is, and then you can figure out which one's most important to you. So it's all about the net.
Well, thanks so much, Dave, for all the information. And buying a new home can be really fun and really exciting. It's just important that you pick the right professional to work with. It's going to set you up to be successful and give you all the information you need before you make that big purchase. Thanks so much to Dave Duncan and all our guests. We're going to go to break, have them come on with us for a couple more minutes to end the show. Thanks for listening. You've been listening to Brashonomics, and we'll be right back.